In the previous session, I explored an application design at a high level. The application is for cyclists, for them to know their position relative to one another. In the end, I had a number of classes and a number of specifications describing those classes. And of course, Jasmine is running against those specifications the whole time. While exploring the design, I did not consider flow at all, and I'm sure that must have frustrated some of you watching. It was intentional, so now I'm going to change thinking and write functionality considering the application flow. So if I add a new specification, the first thing that I'd like to do is log in a cyclist. Immediately that cyclist would like to create a new group, and then update the cyclist's position and get group status. Now you'll see I'm not adding any guts to the specifications. I'm just getting thoughts down in the specifications so that I can see the flow of what we're trying to accomplish, and then I'll start filling in the functionality. Now I'd like to then log in with a second cyclist. So let's change this to first. The second cyclist will not create a new group, but would join an existing group and then update the second cyclist position. So you'll see as I explore the flow, I'm constantly changing the definitions so that it makes sense of what I'm trying to accomplish, and then finally get the group status again. So this is the general idea of the functionality that we're going to be building. So the first thing I'm going to need is of course a server, and I'll create that global to the flow specification, and obviously I'll call so I'll expect some cyclist ID to be returned by GPS server login, and I'll give my name as a login. I save that, and immediately we're on red. So now I need to add the login functionality. So login function cyclist name, and that should bring us back to green, and it does. Next I'd like to create a group, so I'll have some group ID equals GPS server dot create a group, and I'll pass it the cyclist ID. I'm just going to do that so that you can see, and Marius's group as a group name. And immediately we go to red. Now we can add that functionality. Group name, and that should bring us back to green, but it doesn't. So, of course, a bit of sloppy code. Cyclist ID is defined in this describe, but of course it needs to be global. So the important thing to notice is that my specifications still help me identify what's wrong, and now it passes. Next, I'd like to create to update my position. So I'm going to expect some message back, and update position, and autocomplete is now put in GPS sentence, but that is not what I was expecting. Looking at the flow, I definitely need to pass the cyclist so that the correct cyclist is updated. Now the question is, where do you address it? Do we build the functionality here and get it to pass? Or do we go back to the GPS server object description and build it in there? Thinking about it, the update position method has got more to do with the flow of the application than actually the GPS server object. It's very similar to the object having only one reason to change. The test should also have only one reason to change. So we'll move this test to where we're going to update the position, and we've got a server object, and we've going to update the position, but now we want to pass the cyclist ID along with the GPS sentence, and immediately we are on red because the update position is now of course returning the incorrect value. So to get it to pass, I have to add cyclist ID, and that will immediately get us back to green. Now I'm pretty sure you're thinking, when are we actually gonna deal with some real GPS coordinates? The secret is to allow it to happen when the time is right. Now at the moment I don't really need to know that the update was successful. I just want to be able to call it. Soon enough we will have to add that detail. Now I want to call group status, so some data will be GPS server dot group status, And again, like with update position, autocomplete has suggested that I pass the group ID. And this now also doesn't feel quite right to me, because as a cyclist, I have an ID. The server is supposed to know which group I belong to. So why do I need to call it with a group ID? So as before, we're going to remove this functionality or this specification from the GPS server object, because actually it belongs more with the flow specification. And we want to call it with the cyclist ID. Just want to clean this up a bit. And that fails. So message is undefined. Yes, this is a bit ugly, because I asked for status, but I set it to data, and there I used message. So let's just clean that up a bit, and maybe call it group status. And now status of group undefined is equal to status of group 1. So cyclist is undefined, yet here we logged in and got cyclist back. If I look at login here, cyclist, the ID was never returned because it wasn't needed to make the specification pass. Now, I refer to a crack in the code where if you use test-driven development, you will explore along a contour of complexity. So you'll start with a class relationship or wherever you feel comfortable starting, and then maybe like we did here, go over to flow, and you'll be able to do the minimum to get the tests to pass. And then at a point, it will absolutely explode, because you can now see you're going to have to return an ID, which means we're going to have to add some functionality to generate a unique ID. It's going to get all kinds of complexities to keep track of cyclists. And this is what I would define as a crack in the code. And I know now that I'm going to drop into significant detail functionality and start to add code that looks much more similar to what developers would typically start with. But I've allowed the crack to appear by itself. In the next session, I'm going to pick up from this point and explore where this leads.